South Korea is holding the 21st presidential election 2 years earlier than expected to choose a new leader who will replace former President Yoon Suk-yeol after he was removed from office over his martial law order. Polls have been open since 6 a.m. this morning and will remain open for the next 10 hours. We go to one of the polling stations with our An Sung-jin standing by. Good morning, Sung-jin.
Good morning, Tommy. Great to be here.
So, Sung-jin, after weeks of putting up with a deluge of polling and K-pop campaigning, voters finally get their say today.
Right, Tommy. So we're currently going a little bit past 10 a.m. here, and it's been about 4 hours since voting locations began, since 6 a.m. here. I'm currently standing in front of a voting location in Sadangdong in Seoul's Dongjak-gu district. We've been out here since early this morning, and similar to early voting, we've seen a lot of people waiting and trying to cast their ballot. The previous election, this election is actually the first one since the first COVID-19 pandemic. The elections previously where masks were mandatory and regular voters were separated from those that were under isolation. The polling station that I'm at is one of the 14,295 nationwide and 2,260 from Seoul. We already saw the second highest voter turnout rate for early voting, and many have gathered to vote early this morning as well. Have a listen to some of the voters.
Our economy is going through a difficult time right now, so I hope the new president can boost our economy domestically and internationally, and also improve people's livelihoods.
This is my first vote ever, and I'm proud to be participating in it. I would like them to work on making Korea a better country to live in.
It is indeed an exciting day for South Korea. Sung-jin, for our voters who are yet to cast their ballots, do remind us the voting process and what voters should be on the lookout for.
So voting takes place from 6 a.m. till 8 p.m. today, and voters must be 18 or above and bring a government-issued ID. And unlike early voting, regular voting actually requires for voters to go to their voting cast based on their registered address. Which polling station you may go and vote can be found on a voting guide delivered to each household or through the National Election Commission website. Anyone who arrives at the polls and stands in line before the polls close have the right to vote. Taking selfies or pictures of the ballots while inside the polling booth is strictly prohibited. That's all I have for now for this glimpse of the polling station in the early hours of today, and I'll be back with more updates. Back to you, Dami.
All right, Sung-jin, thank you for that report. We appreciate it. Now, it just passed 10 a.m. here in South Korea. How many South Korean voters have already cast their ballots since polls opened? We connect with our Yeouido now at the National Election Commission. Hello there, Euni.
Hello, Dami.
So, Euni, we're still in the early hours of the election day, but how's the turnout looking 4 hours into the voting?
Well, Dami, I'm at the National Election Commission in Gwacheon City, where officials are keeping track of the voter turnout. It's been about 4 hours since the polls opened this morning at 6 a.m. The turnout rate at 10 a.m. is 13.5%, not including early voting turnout. Figures by region are as of 9 a.m. So as of 9 a.m., Daegu, which has recorded the lowest early voter turnout, is now showing the highest turnout rate at 11.5%. Jeollanam-do province, which showed the highest early voter turnout rate, is at 6.6%. The lowest turnout is in Gwangju with 6.3%. The capital, Seoul, is seeing a turnout of 8.5%. Incheon is at 9.3%. Busan at 8.1%, and Daejeon stands at 10%. Gyeonggi-do province stands at 9.8%, while Jeollabuk-do province is at 6.8%. In terms of other provinces, turnout in Chungcheongbuk-do is 9.8%, Chungcheongnam-do 10.2%, Gyeongsangbuk-do 10.9%, and Gyeongsangnam-do 9.9%. In this presidential election, early voting was held last week for 2 days, recording a turnout of slightly over 34%, the second highest on record.
That is right, Euni. So the polls will close at 8 p.m. later tonight. That's when vote counting officially begins. Now, the question is, when will the results be known?
Yes, Tommy. So once the voting ends at 8 p.m., the ballot boxes will be sealed and escorted to the counting centers. Counting begins soon after, and the National Election Commission expects the counting to be finished by around 6 a.m. Wednesday morning. The results should become clear by midnight once 70 to 80% of votes are counted. However, final results, of course, may take longer depending on voter turnout and how close the race is. Once counting is done, the NEC will hold a full committee meeting in which the new president will be formally declared. This meeting is expected to happen between 7 and 9 a.m. on Wednesday, and the process should only take 5 to 10 minutes. The new president's term will immediately begin. On Monday, Do Tae-hak, chairman of the National Election Commission, urged active voter participation, emphasizing the importance of creating a united South Korea through voting. No assured the public that the NEC has prioritized transparency, highlighting measures such as 24-hour CCTV at early voting stations and a vote paper inspection system, both implemented in last year's general election. Authorities are focusing on safety management as well. The National Fire Agency has launched special emergency operations at over 15,000 polling and counting stations nationwide, running until ballot counting ends. Also this morning at 6 a.m., police declared the highest level of emergency alert, mobilizing all available personnel. This heightened readiness will continue until the new president's inauguration is complete and he arrives at his office on Wednesday. Around 60,000 officers are assigned to polling station security, 45,000 to ballot transport, and 7,000 to counting center protection. That's all I have for now. I'll be back with more updates for later. Back to you, Dami.
Please do, Eunhee. That was our Eunhee live from the National Election Commission. Now, presidential hopefuls are following the election from their homes on this big day after having wrapped up their 22 days of campaigning at locations that are dear to their respective parties. The Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung held this campaign finale at Seoul's Yeouido Park. Our Moon-soo reports.
In the final rally of the 21st presidential race, Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung returned to where it all began, Yeouido, the symbolic heart of the December 3rd martial law protests. Surrounded by a sea of supporters and waves of blue balloons, Lee called on voters to complete what he is calling a revolution of light.
Tomorrow's vote will decide, end the insurrection or continue it, restore livelihoods or destroy them, grow the economy or wreck it.
He accused forces of insurrection of spreading fake news and manipulating public opinion, and said only a decisive voter turnout could prevent their resurgence. Before stepping off stage, Lee and his supporters sang the national anthem through all 4 verses, and he bowed deeply, thanking the crowd. With campaign activity banned on election day, this was Lee's final opportunity to address the public face-to-face. But his campaign didn't end there. After the rally, Lee live-streamed on YouTube to make a final appeal. Sitting alone in front of the camera, he told viewers he was still 3 votes short and urged them to help carry him across the finish line. Over the past 22 days, Lee's campaign traveled over 5,000 kilometers, taking him to 66 rallies with 236,000 people on the trail. His last day of campaigning took him across key battlegrounds in this whole metropolitan area, from Gangbuk to Gangsa, and finally to Seongnam, where he first entered politics.
Your vote is the start of real change, turning despair into hope, division into unity, and stagnation into growth. Trust Lee Jae-myung, a loyal and capable public servant who has always delivered results through action. I'll get the job done.
Lee pledged to order an immediate review of the economic situation upon taking office, placing urgent focus on recovering livelihoods. Striking a tone of inclusion, Lee said he would be a president for all, not just those in blue. Moon-soo, Arirang News.
And the People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo staged a nationwide campaign from Jeju Island to the capital Seoul to spend the eve of Election Day at the Grass Plaza in front of Seoul City Hall, promising reform and governance. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
Literally pulling out all the stops on his last day of campaigning, People Power Party Kim Moon-soo travelled across 5 cities in 10 hours, from the southern island of Jeju to the capital of Seoul. The 73-year-old candidate pledged reforming government and his party to meet the call of the times and the demands of the people.
I will push for bold party reforms to achieve internal democracy. a horizontal relationship between the party and the president's non-intervention in party affairs, and a healthy relationship between the party and the government.
Once again, he issued an apology over impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law declaration, which has tainted his party by association. As he stopped by Busan for the third time, the conservative stronghold of Daegu and the central city of Daejeon, Kim lashed out against his Democratic Party rival Lee Jae-myung, warning against his style of dictatorial governance, and raised the red flag on Lee's family scandals. Kim stressed that his own wife had never used his corporate card, and that his daughter had never publicly uttered vulgar language like Lee's son allegedly did. As if to prove his point, Kim was joined by his daughter in Daegu and stood on stage with his family at his final rally at Seoul City Hall Square. The PPP candidate also emphasized unity with former rivals from the party primary, including Na Kyung-won, An Chol-soo and Han Dong-un, to prevent what he called a dictatorship under Lee Jae-myung. After failing to achieve a united conservative ticket with the Reform Party's Lee Jun-seok, Kim called on voters to back him, not Reform's candidate, saying a split vote would only help the DP's Lee Jae-myung win.
I believe tomorrow will be a great day. It will be the day we stop the bulletproof dictatorship and protect the Republic of Korea. A day when this nation can finally blossom.
Kim ended the night meeting citizens in areas bustling with young people, including Hongdae and Central Seoul. Over the 22 days of official campaigning, Kim has travelled more than 7,300 kilometres to hold 157 events. Oh Seung, Arirang News.
And the Reform Party's Lee Jun-seok is down in Busan City this morning, encouraging voters to cast their ballot. He spent the final day of campaigning solidifying his support among young voters. At Korea Polytechnic University in Gyeonggi-do Province, he joined the students for a meal at the school cafeteria, his final lunchtime outreach. He then wrapped up the day in the conservative stronghold of Daegu City at Susong Lake, where he appealed to conservative voters by portraying himself as a new generation leader for the right. Now, regardless of who wins the election, the incoming administration needs to reset South Korea's foreign policy as one of the core national missions, especially after months of a hiatus in diplomacy. But how this is done will vary depending on who actually becomes the president. Our Kim Jong-sil has more.
Three frontrunners, three different visions for South Korea's role on the global stage. In their final televised debate, the candidates outlined foreign policy agendas that could reshape the country's position in a region facing rapid change. Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung called for balance between the U.S. alliance and stable ties with China and Russia. He warned of a diplomatic vacuum since the December 3rd martial law unrest and said South Korea's approach must evolve.
The U.S. alliance is the foundation of our foreign policy. It must be developed practically, inclusively, and with a long-term vision. But we must not neglect ties with China and Russia. They require careful, strategic management.
On North Korea, Lee seems to be charting a different course from past progressive leaders favoring step-by-step engagement over demands for immediate denuclearization. Conservative candidate Moon-soo took a harder line, saying diplomacy must be backed by strength.
Kim Jong-un's dictatorship threatens our lives and property with nuclear weapons and missile provocations. I will build a transparent, principled inter-Korean relationship and strengthen our defenses by reinforcing nuclear deterrence through the U.S. alliance.
At the same time, his team told Arirang News he's open to meeting North Korea's leader while supporting economic and cultural engagement as long as it's grounded in South Korea's constitutional principle of one unified nation. At 40, Lee Jun-seok is the youngest candidate in the race. Last week, he laid out his latest foreign policy vision backed by sweeping institutional reform.
The president of South Korea must have international experience and a practical mindset. If elected, I will merge the unification and foreign ministries and appoint a deputy prime minister for national security to oversee foreign affairs, unification and defense policies.
He said South Korea should lead its alliance and not just rely on it. Three visions for South Korea's future on the world stage. By tonight, one of them will begin to shape it. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
And all eyes are on what the incoming president's first directive will be. Now, their visions for South Korea's diplomacy may differ sharply, but all of the three main runners appear to be on the same page when it comes to bouncing back the country's economy. Our Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
With economic institutions both at home and abroad revising down their growth projections for South Korea, economic pledges are taking center stage in the presidential race.
The domestic economy shrank by 0.2% in the first quarter. Negative growth. How can our people make a living like this? Please elect Lee Jae-myung, a capable, loyal, and well-prepared worker as president.
It's true that Korea is now in a slump with very low growth, among the worst globally, right? I will bring this economy back to life as the president of the economy, everyone.
Half of Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung's pledges focus on the economy, while 7 out of 10 of People Power Party candidate Kim Moon-soo's are economic pledges. And Lee's top economic pledge and Kim's second is artificial intelligence, signaling how both view it as central to Korea's economic growth. Both propose investing 100 trillion won, or around $71 billion into fostering the AI industry, but their plans of how they'll use these funds differ. Lee Jae-myung's AI for All initiative aims to expand public access by offering free advanced AI services, including a Korean version of ChatGPT, while also pledging to secure over 50,000 high-performance GPUs. Kim plans to set up a public-private fund to foster AI unicorns and vows to train 200,000 young specialists through graduate programs and software-focused universities. But both agree that Korea's regulations are outdated, with Lee calling for special exemptions and Kim pushing to align regulations with global standards. Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-seok, currently third in the polls, has proposed market-driven AI innovation with minimal state intervention. And another issue that has garnered much attention is each candidate's bid to improve work-life balance.
Also, he focused on 4.5-day work week. Is actually aimed at reducing worker fatigue and improving work-life balance. If you look at the Kim Moon-soo's proposal, he believes that with a good negotiation between workers and employers, a more flexible system can be achieved without making dramatic changes.
He has proposed reducing the standard work week from 40 to 36 hours by cutting Friday afternoons without reducing wages. Kim's plan adds an extra hour per day from Monday to Thursday for a shorter Friday without reducing total hours, and includes exemptions to the 52-hour cap for the semiconductor sector. And Lee Jun-seok, instead of a 4.5-day workweek proposal, has pledged labor reforms that include giving local governments the authority to adjust the minimum wage to revitalize regional economies. Though each candidate's visions differ, their focus on the economy underscores its central role in this election. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea ended 2024 with a botched martial law order and saw yet another South Korean president impeached this April. And just 60 days later, the country is now on the hunt for a new leader. We recap the last 6 months and what the past half a year has left us with. Joining me now is my colleague Kim Jong-sil. Welcome back, Jong-sil.
Thanks for having me, Tam.
So, Jong-sil, it's been a hectic year for all of us in South Korea. Now, it was the December 3rd martial law order to begin with that caught the South Korean people and also the entire world off guard.
Absolutely, Dami. Today's election is honestly an aftermath of the December 3rd martial law. As you said, when then President Yoon Suk-yeol unexpectedly declared it in a late-night televised address. Now, he accused the opposition-led National Assembly of paralyzing the government and invoked sweeping emergency powers banning political activity, tightening media control, and authorizing warrantless arrests. You might remember the the footage, troops surrounding the assembly building as citizens and lawmakers rushed there to protest the martial law. Then around 1 a.m. on December 4th, 190 lawmakers, including members of Yoon's own party, some scaling the fence to get in, convened inside, unanimously voting to overturn the decree. Martial law was lifted just 6 hours after the declaration. Yoon publicly apologized, but the political backlash was overwhelming. On December 14th, the National Assembly voted to impeach him. He became the first sitting president to be detained while in office and was later indicted for insurrection. On April 4th, the Constitutional Court upheld the impeachment, citing grave violations of the democratic order. Under South Korean law, a new election must follow within 60 days, and that brought us to today.
Jung-soo, it feels like yesterday that the martial law order happened, but it's been 6 months already. Now, we're seeing a lot of energy around today's vote, and a part of that momentum came early. Let's talk about the 2-day early voting that took last place, both domestic and overseas.
Absolutely, Tommy. South Koreans have already shown strong interest and engagement ahead of today's vote. Domestic early voting closed at 34.74%, slightly lower than the last presidential election, but still strong given it was held entirely on weekdays. Turnout was highest in the liberal southwest, like Jeollanam-do province, at 56.5%, while conservative regions like Daegu and Busan hovered in the mid-20s and low 30s. The National Election Commission introduced hourly turnout updates and installed CCTV screens showing the ballot boxes, part of a broader effort to boost transparency and public trust. As for overseas voting, the numbers hit an all-time high with a 79.5% turnout, with ballots cast in 223 locations across 118 countries, including first-time sites in Lithuania and Luxembourg. Those ballots have now been sealed and flown home for today's final count.
Well, Jung-soo, we have to talk about the campaign trail. It was a short but certainly turbulent race, especially for the People Power Party, hasn't it?
That's right, Tommy. The brief campaign period was anything but smooth, especially for the ruling party.
Previously ruling.
Previously ruling.
Right, no longer ruling.
No longer ruling, it is. In a chaotic overnight twist on May 10th, the ruling party leadership stripped Kim Moon-soo of his candidacy and rushed to replace him with former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, and by sunrise, he was officially registered. But by nightfall, party members had rejected the switch in a vote, and Kim Moon-soo was reinstated. He also pursued a last-minute unity deal with Lee Jun-seok of the Reform Party, but that too failed. He firmly rejected the merger, calling it regressive and a step backward for conservative reform. Meanwhile, the DP's Lee Jae-myung stuck to his message, promising to bring an end to the 6 months of political chaos triggered by the martial law.
And of course, the campaign strategies by the main runners couldn't have looked more different, right? Now, how did they try to connect with voters to convince them that they are the suitable leader?
Absolutely. Well, this election season wasn't just dramatic. It was also unprecedented in how some of the candidates hit the trail. Now, Lee Jae-myung wore a bulletproof vest and stood behind ballistic glass throughout the campaign, citing credible threats. I just wanted to correct that, not throughout, some of the campaigns, citing credible threats, including reports of smuggled firearms. It comes just over a year after he survived a knife attack in Busan, and it underscored just how charged this election had been. Kim Moon-soo spent the final stretch of his campaign slamming Lee, repeatedly referencing his ongoing legal battles. Now, Lee Jun-seok, meanwhile, hit college campuses using student cafeterias as a backdrop to rally young voters behind his call for generational change.
You know, Jung-soo, whether liberal or conservative South Koreans are heading to polls once again with one goal: to move forward.
Absolutely. I think today's vote will test whether the country is ready to rebuild the trust in its democracy after 6 months of political unrest.
Indeed, Jung-soo, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me, Tammy.
요새 쉬었음 청년들이 굉장히 사회 문제로 대두되고 있는데 그 부분에 대한 해결이 가장 먼저 이루어져야 될 거라고 생각합니다.
저는 일단 각자가 말하는 정책에 대해서 집중하고 그래도 5년이라는 길다면 길고 짧다면 짧은 시간 동안 본인이 말하는 거에 대해서 잘 지켜가는 정부가 되었으면 좋겠습니다.
기후와 관련해서는 조금 더 재생에너지나 뭐 이런 쪽에 조금 더 관심을 가지고 탈원전 정책에 조금 더 관심을 가지는 그런 정부가 되었으면 좋겠습니다.
대학 서열화를 끝내고 그리고 사교육 시장을 줄이는 방향으로 좀 더 평등한 교육 정책을 위해서 애써야 되지 않나 이런 생각을 갖고 있습니다.
누가 돼도 상관은 없지만 공약을 하셨다면 하나라도 지켜주는 게 있었으면 좋겠어요. 아무래도 자영업 쪽에 있다 보니까 자영업자 쪽에 조금 더 신경을 써줬으면 좋을 것 같아요.
일단 기본적으로 주거 안정이 좀 제대로 이루어졌으면 하는 바람입니다.
없는 분들을 좀 생각해서 서로가 나눔의 실천을 했으면 좋겠어요.
아무래도 제가 이제 30대 초반이다 보니까 이제 결혼 이런 관련해서 정책들이 물론 지금도 잘 나오고 있는 것 같은데 아직도 청년들이 좀 결혼을 준비하는 데 있어서 어려움을 겪고 있기 때문에 결혼 문제에 있어서 좀 이제 정책 같은 것도 좀 더 많이 완화되고 대출 규제라든지 이런 것들 많이 좀 털어졌으면 좋겠다라는 생각이 있습니다.
Now, that is all we have at this hour, but Arirang News will continue to cover the presidential election throughout the day. We'll be back with live updates at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
천안에 가면